find me in the spot where the floppies be. Till I give it a read, keep it crisp in the sleeve. Every Tuesday night feels like Christmas Eve. Living between Wednesdays.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, and joining me tonight is Dennis Valencia, and we're going to talk about their new book, Celestial Night. Dennis, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Konrad. Really looking forward to this. It's the highlight of my day, man.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear it, and I hope I live up to it. So, very first easy question that I like to ask, because when I first went to my first Comic-Con, and I was meeting these creators who I really admired, Tony Daniel, Greg Capullo, nice. I didn't know what they looked like, right? So it was just a face, or it was a name on a page and then art to me. For the folks who've maybe never seen your face, never heard your name, who is Dennis?
I'll be honest. From New York, originally from New York back in the day. I currently live in South Carolina. I would say the dirty South. Probably reading comics since I was 7 years old. Fell in love with classic X-Men, John Byrne, Chris Claremont. John Byrne, that's where I started drawing, started creating from there.
Nice.
It's a little bit of a sordid past. I don't want to go dark on you. When I grew up in New York, I lived in a neighborhood that did not like my ethnicity, put it that way. It was a very rough childhood of, racism, I'll be honest with you. And because of that, getting tired of being, jumped and called names and all that, I stayed indoors. And I turned indoors and I sat next to my grandmother and I would read comic books. And after I would read my comic books, I would draw. And I would draw, whatever was there, Bob Layton, George Perez. And I'd send it to my grandma. She'd be watching she'd be watching Remington Steele and 227, these weird shows. I was like, I had no interest in, but I sent it to my grandmother and I would draw. And for me, after, stepping outside the door and facing all this racism and hate, for me, the comic was my thing. It was like good versus bad. It was, and X-Men, classic X-Men was, about that mutant, and it was about the racism, or I guess the bigotry they got. And for me, that was my thing, was good versus bad. And I turned, I turned something negative where I could have went down to a darker path into something positive, where I started drawing and I developed a skill and I started developing characters and I started following other people's styles. And it was just cool. From then on, it kind of just spiraled into something where I am today, in a nutshell.
Beautiful. And you know what? I definitely think like you said, you don't want to go dark, but it's important to address things like racism and other horrible things that people do to each other, because it definitely informs how we create the world we're in. And it's obviously, unfortunately, not gone anywhere. So that gets us to today, basically, and your book, Celestial Night.
Thank you.
So tell me, what is it?
So, strangely enough, I created the character when I was years old. So I don't want to date myself, Konrad. It was 35 years ago, sir. That's how long ago. I created him 35 years ago in my first issue. And I'm sure you saw, I have my original drawings from 88. So he was called Star Knight. And then I had him Celestial Warrior. I always loved drawing armor. So for me, Bob Layton was my guy. Bob Layton and his Iron Man. So I had that. And then, of course, Rom. Rom was a big influence. My brother introduced me to Rom, and I was like, cool, Dire Rafts and his neutralizer. That was so cool. So I started creating this, and I didn't do a lot of spatial characters like those in outer space, but he was my only guy, and I really started practicing armor. I like just doing those lines and, just watching what Bob Layton did. But created him 35 years ago. He sat in the back of my brain. I'll be honest with you, I took a hiatus from just being an artist for a good 20 years. I stopped drawing. I stopped drawing when I went to college. From college to about 3 years ago, I just stopped drawing. It was a weird phase. You get, family, your priorities are different. I would draw once in a while for my kids, nothing crazy. And then I met a great bunch of guys, the Savage Sandbox, and one of the gentlemen, he was my age, and he, on his bucket list, his whole thing was to check off that bucket list was to create his own comic. And I did his covers for him. And I was like, you know what? He is my age. It took him this long to do his book. Why can't I do it? I'm no different than every other creator out there. So I'm a group of 7. I was the 7th one. I was the last guy on the list, but I learned from them. I saw their mistakes, what they did right. And finally had the stones to finally create my own book, and that's how it came about. Would it be something I would have said 3 years ago that I would actually have my own book? 100% no. I was very happy doing covers and pinups and doing work for the indie community, but just seeing what my peers were doing and to have that support system was really what got me to finally do my book for the Celestial Knight. The character, I'm so happy you read it, dude. I'm so Konrad. I can't. I was at work. I opened up my quick just to check, where my. I see you read it, and all I could focus on was I love it, and I can't tell you, dude. The feels are like on my phone. Like, oh, he loved it. Awesome. Yeah. Character is Jeremy. His dog Norman. It's an origin story. It's issue 1 of 3. So how Jeremy gets his powers, and then basically how he comes to terms with his powers and fights a kaiju in Times Square, and it kind of launches him into his whole Celestial Knight hero-ship, put it that way.
Yeah, and so I guess where to start. So for a little bit of context for folks, so the already out now, as of time of editing, I think there's 15 days left.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to try and whip this up real quick so we can get even further promotion. So maybe by the time people are watching this, there'll be 10 days left. I'm not sure. Okay. But the first campaign went off without a hitch. I believe you blew past your budget, or not your budget, but your goal, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I crushed it. I did 4,600 with 104 backers on my first campaign. I try not to overwhelm myself because I get in my head a lot. My biggest tier was $130. And I had probably like 12 people back that, and you know how it is. Yeah, but a lot of them are friends and family. So for this campaign, I did half that. My biggest tier is only $60. And I told my friends and family, like my friends still support it, but I told my family, like, this one is about me and the indie community. This is about me and the people I can touch and tell my story to. So they didn't support, put it that way. So I know the numbers aren't going to match, but I think every campaign, and I'm sure, Konrad, you've seen it from multiple campaigns, you can't compare. And I think as creators, we start comparing ourselves like, oh, look at this guy's campaign, and there's a friendly competition, but you can't compare. It's apples and oranges.
It really is. Like when it comes to putting out your own Kickstarter, making your own comic, and doing the crowdfunding in any capacity, it really is an individual thing. The only way I think it'd be fair to try and compare that is like if you look at groups that have gotten together as a collective group and they as a team put out Kickstarters, I'd say you can compare that because you could say, oh, they have a built audience of their own followers that want to support their work. But for you doing your own thing, definitely you're doing great. If I'm not mistaken, with your current campaign, you're also actually at goal. So you're already funded. Now it's just icing on the cake. Let's get the extra fun stuff. So I don't want to get too far ahead because we started covering out real quick, which is good, and I like it. But I want to make sure that the people watching can get like a funneled, controlled experience. Yes, so as you mentioned, the Celestial Knight's about the protagonist Jeremy, who basically very early in the first comic, I think it's the first or second page, gets like old school alien abducted, then it goes black, and then he wakes up basically in a field with his dog, and he feels weird. His hand's glowing, he can see his skeleton, and then he can hear his dog speaking, which is, I mean, that's fantastic. I wish, right? Right. And then as the story unfolds in the first issue, he starts getting these powers. Monsters start popping up all over the world in major cities, and then Jeremy's like, okay, well, put up or shut up. I've got these gifts. Let's go use them. Yep. And he goes and fights this monster, and it's a wicked design. I'll put up a shot of it because it just looks gross and titanic, and I love it. Awesome. So I guess where we'll start then from here is we sort of dived into it. So if people are already interested with Iron Man-esque but through alien magic or technology we don't know yet. Powers, fighting kaijus, and psychic dogs. If someone's already into it, already like, shut up and take my money. For the Kickstarter, I like to ask, what is the minimum amount someone could contribute to get like just a digital copy of the comic, nothing else? What would like a physical do? And then what is like one of your bigger ones?
Gotcha. So digital is $3. I'm really happy. Yeah, I got a backer today. He's overseas. I was so happy with that. You know, like,
hell yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, I was like, cool. Like, someone saw he dug it overseas, and he actually messaged me that, hey, I just backed your book. I'm overseas, and I was just like, again, I was on break after when I saw your email. It was like, that's awesome. Again, the feels are coming out. Right. Sorry, where was the second part of that question?
So the digital's $3.
Yes.
American, correct?
Yes.
So you're based
American.
in the States, so $3 American, $5 Canadian, or whatever.
Yeah.
What's a physical copy run somebody?
Okay. So a physical copy is $8. I will say this: 36 pages. It does have a centerfold pullout. So right, dude, Konrad. I don't know about you. So I'm old school Image comics. Like, I'm 90s Image, dude. What I saw, like, I can do a centerfold, like, cool, like, spreadsheet, like 3-page pullout. I was like, oh yeah.
Oh,
like,
that's cool.
I want to level up. So for me, when I work with these guys in the Savage Sandbox, they all have cool tiers. Like, one's doing a plushie, one's doing a action figure. I'm on my second book. Like cool your jets. So I wanted to, right. I just wanted to keep it simple. So again, it's all about the book. It's 36 pages, bigger than a normal book. It has the centerfold pullout, so it's $8. The shipping, it's very reasonable. I kept telling everyone, like, it's about me getting my story out. So give or take $15, just figuring some tax. I can get you book 2. There are add-ons if you want to get book 1, or if you don't have book 1, but very, very reasonable as far as just trying to get my book out there. My highest tier, and I told you my first campaign, my highest tier was $130. Bananas. This time, my highest tier is only $60. Like, that's half of that, less than half. And that's really just a commission sketch. So one of the covers, because there's 3 covers, the standard cover, there's a chromium cover, and there's a blank sketch. The blank sketch, if you do the $60, you get the blank sketch, and I'll do a commission for you. If anyone knows how I do commissions, I don't just do little remarks with like one color. I go, if you supported me and you showed your faith in my product, you're not just getting some silly remark with some one figure sketch. I'm doing full figure, lighting effects, backgrounds. Wow. And if I got time, trust me, I'll turn that baby around and do a full double spread, something banana sandwich crazy. So I appreciate you taking the time, or people taking the time to just support the campaign. I want to make sure you get more than your bang for your buck. I come from a bunch of guys who like give extra, always go the extra yard. And I'm in that same lane. Like, I always think of that too. So yeah, those are my 3 tiers. Digital $3. A simple book is $8 plus shipping. And then the biggest campaign is $60. Tier, excuse me.
Yeah. Beautiful. And
thank you.
Frankly, for a commission cover like that is extremely inexpensive. If you go to a Comic-Con and ask for the same thing, you are likely going to start at $100 for a simple remark and go way up.
Right.
The other beautiful thing I like to mention to the folks out there, the second campaign is actually fully funded already. Now it's the bonus stuff, the extra stuff, getting Dennis maybe more money to make cooler prints, or getting a little cash bundle prepared for maybe issue 3. So there's no risk of it not getting made. That's the cool part about this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book, the actual, like, the story, all that good stuff. So what I really liked a lot about it, actually I liked a lot about it, but one of the things I really liked was, I guess we'll start with Norman, the dog.
Yeah.
So in the back of the first book, you have a beautiful picture of this cute dog. It very clearly, it's the inspiration for Norman. So in the book, Norman acts as a companion to Jeremy, spits out weird random facts, but also kind of gives him the nudge he needs. Where did that come from? What was the inspiration for that?
So, when I created, CK 35 years, excuse me, 35 years ago, he didn't have a companion, but as I was forming the book and I was putting a story together, we all read books. You always have that wingman. You always have your oracle. And that's where Norman came in. Norman's my dog. He's actually a rescue. We rescued about 3 years ago.
Oh,
he's
nice.
He's a great. I wish he was here. He'd be sleeping on the floor. He's the sweetest guy. He's just a big oof. You know what I mean? But I wanted a wingman, and for something where I don't want it to be like, I want it to be centered on the character, but I wanted him someone that could either play off him or at least not be a sense of humor in that dichotomy, but someone who can kind of guide him. And I want Jeremy to be, well, Jeremy is a character like very much like us. He's still trying to find his way. He doesn't know if he's doing right or wrong. But here's his voice of reason behind. And even though Norman says these things that are a little silly, and you can see where his powers are coming from, or I don't want to spoil it, but he has, you don't know if it's because he's a dog and he watches a lot of TV, or that he actually has ability and he's learned these random useless knowledge, that he just spits out randomly during, interaction with Jeremy. But that was really it. The inspiration behind him was, I wanted to have that oracle to Jeremy that can kind of guide him through that little bit of life where he has those hiccups. And I feel like, when you're myself as an artist and as a creator, a lot of us are loners. We sit at a desk and we kind of do our thing, and we're not exactly the most social people. But,
True.
but we always have that one, someone we talk to or someone we're close to. We have that wingman. And to me, that's Jeremy. He's a very singular individual. He's kind of lost. He's still trying to find his way. He doesn't have the biggest, aspirations in life. He doesn't have live in a big home, lives in a trailer park. And, his wingman is his dog. And I can relate to that. Like, I think most of us can relate to that. Our dog is always there. There's unconditional love. And as the series develops, you'll see it. And I use that phrase very strongly, what unconditional love can bring from you. Because that's going to be a theme you're going to see throughout the series.
I was just going to ask. Okay, cool. Yeah. So leading into the next question.
Sure.
The first book opens with like a sepia tone scene, memory, however you want to put it. And it also, if I'm not mistaken, ends with one. Yep. And the first scene, the opening scene, is Jeremy's father, and I think it's in 1988 or the 80s.
Yes.
It's basically him leaving, going to America to get the American dream, and we're in the Philippines, and he's telling his wife and his kid, hey, I'm going to work a bit, I'll send you money, you'll come over, and we'll have the dream. As you've mentioned, Jeremy's living in a trailer park. He is alone in that, minus his dog, of course.
Yes.
So I guess I'll start with you. That is a very, very common story, people coming over from other countries going to America or Canada, sending their families over money and then flying them out. It, from the sounds of it, did not happen for you that way. I believe you were born in the States. Is that right?
I was actually born in the Philippines.
Oh, okay. That is your story. Perfect.
It is very close to it. Yes, sir.
So what was your experience like with the American dream?
So, I was so happy you picked up on that. So the inspiration behind that scene in the story, I have a picture of my father from 1972. And it's a picture of him coming to the States. He's actually landed off the plane. And he looks like Elvis. He got the big hair. He's got the shades. Yeah, he got the shades. He got the big, turtleneck jacket. And his smile on his face is ear to ear. And he just landed in the United States. Came from the Philippines. He left my mother and her 3 children. I am one of the 3 that he left. He came here to start a foundation. But the picture, and clear as day, is him in front of the plane, coming off the plane, and his brother took the picture. And it's one of those things I saw as a little kid, and I was like, that's awesome. Like, this is my dad hitting here. Look at his smile. He's styling, he's profiling, and he came here to set this dream. My family hit it. They did the American dream. For me, whenever I see negative things in the news and people, negative this or negative that. I said, it's possible. It is so possible. There's a reason that dream exists. And that was one of the things behind my book. Like that scene where you see that, and I don't want to go too far in the book, where you see Jeremy hold that picture is the actual scene. It's not that scene, but it's inspired by that moment where my dad landed in the US. Like to me, it goes way further. And I love the fact that, you hit it. I didn't want to bring myself into the book, but you know how they would say, and I hate this cliche. You write what you know. They say that all the time. But for me, it was such an important moment that I was hoping it would translate on paper to individuals. But that was the inspiration behind that. I'm so happy you picked up on that sepia tone, because that use of color just to tell from time. Time. Yeah, I really appreciate that, because that was something I was like, would that translate over? Would you pick that up? Super happy that you picked up on that, Konrad.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you've done it in such a good way too, because actually, I'm just gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, not only did you use the sepia tone, like the borders of it are like washed out and have that like not burnt, but like the black and the dark is sort of seeping in from the corners.
Nice.
And there's kind of like a flaky area or texture on it. It looks like, I mean, appreciate it's a comic page, but it looks like an old photo that's got sun damage on it and all this other stuff. And I think my favorite part is on that page in the top right, it just says Manila, the Philippines. And it's like, cool. We know where we are. And I was like, oh, this dude's like living up the attempt at the American dream. And I'm like, this has got to be like 70s, 80s. And then it very quickly, like, and such a good way to crash course this and bring it into like modern times. It immediately follows that page with Jeremy, leash in hand, phone in hand, at the trailer park, and he's basically getting dumped.
Yeah, right.
Like, oof. And it's a little jarring of a move, because it's like hope, this awesome thing, old school, and then modern hasn't worked out. Or at least Jeremy's not quite where he wants to be, I would assume.
Right.
But yeah, it was such a good transition.
Thank you.
I guess, like, to sort of continue off of that, and what you mentioned earlier about sort of having love and support and what you can do with that. For Jeremy, from what I've read, like I said, I read the first issue, it appears he's alone in life. Is that correct?
He is alone. He does have a sister. He mentioned it briefly in this issue. When issue 2, you start to be more of his outside circle. So you will get introduced to his sister. Sister has a boyfriend. So he mentions it briefly of like, oh, thank goodness she's here. She stays with her boyfriend a lot. And if you see at the end of the issue, you're going to see like there's definitely a lot of moving parts. But yeah, she is a very small circle. He's not where he wants to be. But again, I think at that age, we're all kind of trying to find our lane. And that's where it comes to that head of like, what is my lane? One of the things I always want to talk about, like as a creator, if you were Konrad, if I said, you were bit by a radioactive spider and suddenly you gain the powers of like, a superhuman Spider-Man, what would make you want to defend the planet? Just because you have these powers doesn't mean you want to risk your life to save a lot of people that you don't know, a lot of people who don't agree with you, a lot of people you don't agree with. But what's going to motivate you to put on that cape and that cowl, that spandex, and what's going to make you want to be a hero, much less a villain? And you could go the other way and be a villain. And that was one of the things I wanted to say. It's a 3-issue arc, but that's why I laid the foundation in issue 1. The origin story is over 3 issues, but what creates that character to be a hero or a villain, and B, what motivates that just to get those powers? Why am I going to defend the planet? Why am I going to defend all these people who may not like me, or I don't like them, or I don't agree with them? And I think that's something where, like, in comic books, it's so easy. It's like, I got powers, like, I mean, your thoughts.
No, you know what? I totally agree. Like, so many times, as a comic, like, I guess, back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, like, whenever pick your favorite character and pick whatever year they're created by whomever. it's so easy to go, Peter Parker just, he wants to be cool, he wants to get the girl, he wants to feel normal and not be picked on, he gets these powers. It would have been really easy for him to go, hey, Flash, dead.
Right.
And instead he's, picking cats out of trees, helping pick people out of fires and fighting all sorts of crazy villains. So I like that you're engaging with the why. And me being a lifelong dog person, I love that in this issue, in the issue 1, Norman kind of gives Jeremy that little get your ass moving that he needs. Because it's it's like on surface level, it's cute. But I think there's something to be said about that unconditional love that you get from your often canine companion. And they're just blatant belief, but also like that extreme, I guess, optimism or positivity. So it's going to be interesting to see what you do with it, as well as the other monsters I mentioned that sort of attack the world and the folks that come out or that we meet as a result of that. And me personally, on your Kickstarter page, you've got a shot of it. I think it's the second page down. There's a completely red page, and there's a dude holding a triple-barreled chain gun, and that's just right up my alley. I'm like, oh, I want to meet him. Like, that looks cool to me. So
that's just that makes me so happy because when everyone knows you got to have your rogues gallery. Like, who are your villains? And as I've created villains for this series, everyone has a favorite. Like, it's this one, it's that one. I can't even tell you, like, the Gatling guy, like the guy with the big gun, like, that's awesome. Like, that makes me, that hits again the feels. It makes me so happy that it's not just like, you have this one villain, but everyone has a reason. Like, I dig that, I dig that, I dig that. And I can't wait to tell the story so I can, do them justice, do you justice for digging this character.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you know what? Let's talk up the Celestial Knight. So
sure.
And again, I'll have images come up, but basically the Celestial Knight, he's head to toe gold armor, which bold choice, and then the black cape, and he's got on the, I guess his right side, a Spawn-esque cover over his eye.
Yes.
How did you arrive at that type of design?
So I'm not one for being symmetrical. I work in a field right now. My 9-to-5 is a design job. And when we talk about design, a lot of clients are always very symmetrical. They want that left side to match the right. I'm not that. I've always been like, want to do something asymmetrical. I think it's just more interesting. So at that moment in time when I was creating him, when he was always in the back of my head, I always loved armor. Something about the sheen of it. It's clean. If you can draw it right, it just hits. And there's so many artists who don't, not someone to do it right. I think a lot of people shy away from doing armor because it's a lot of work. The coloring on it it's a process. So for me, it was just one of those things where when I started creating him, I love drawing armor. Again, I've said it before, Bob Layton was my guy when it came to armor. So doing that was just a natural thing of being like, I want to create something really cool, look aesthetically. The mark on the side of his eye, on the right side, well, if you're facing him would be your right, is that you'll get to understand what that means. So, it's a symbol for what his realm is for, I don't want to spoil anything, but his realm, that's his mark. And you'll get to see other individuals from their realms, but that's a mark of his realm. But yeah, it wasn't so much. It's funny because I get a lot of feedback. Like, Spawn was one of them. They're like, hey, and I know the way I draw has a little bit of a image, kind of a, not a McFarlane kick to it, but at certain angles, I could totally see it. That was one. Yeah. And then the other thing was they're like, oh, a Dr. Fate. I'm like, I get it. It's a gold helmet.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not even a helmet. It's like, it's kind of a helmet, but it's not a helmet. So, but the colors are off. It just depends on what angle and how I draw it. So I've gotten feedback from a certain post I'll put, and they're like, oh, kind of Dr. Fate. I understand. But to me, that's flattering. Like, if you're going to get compared to any character, Dr. Fate's pretty badass. Like, you can't go wrong with that,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
And to talk about your art style too, like, it's definitely, it's not exactly McFarlane. It's not exactly 1980s Jim Lee, but it definitely is. It's of that era. It feels like the 90s boom of Image. Like the front cover for Celestial Night, where you've got him, like this.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it's because you've done it in armor, so there's so much going on. But like every little, it looks like it's actual human muscle.
Yeah.
But then obviously you've got this golden sheen to it. So there's tons of lines to indicate all these muscles, and I don't know how you did this all, because God, this would be time consuming and hard to figure out. But you've got all these different sheens and blurred parts because they're hitting reflections from around him, especially like here on his bicep. He's got like all weird bent light around him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels biological, but it definitely looks like armor. It's all gold, which is, I get the Dr. Fate reference. With his big... I don't know what I'd call them, but the armor bits here with like big ears. He's got the big fin on the front.
Yeah.
I could see like Beta Ray Bill or some sort of Norse or fantasy Viking inspiration as well.
Konrad, can't you see like the 90s influence in that? Like, right?
Massive.
Right.
It is so of that era.
Right.
I guess, like you said, you took a 20-year break from drawing.
Yeah.
So when did you start drawing back up again? I guess that would be 2010.
Was it 3 years ago? Yeah. So no, that was 2020. Strangely enough, I stopped drawing, and this sounds really silly, and I know you guys can relate to this. I met my wife. She was a little, she's a dime piece, and I didn't want her to know that I was a nerd. And that was during the time, comics at the time and superheroes, that Marvel wasn't out yet. It was a frown upon. I was like, oh, you're a nerd, you read comic books. So, at that time when I was that's part of my life, I was into like working out and dressing well and, meeting girls and all that. I met my wife, she's a dime piece. I didn't want her to know, like, oh, I draw, but I kind of like hid that part of like comic shops and comic books and like my posters came off my wall, like that kind of stuff. And I stopped really and jumping into that, the art form of comics. And then that's when I went through this dark phase of just like, I felt lost. Like I was at a job, it was great. And you're like, when you feel like something's missing.
Yeah. You're comfortable, you're okay, but it's like, where is it?
Yeah. And, and I hope never, if you do ever feel that, don't stop, like keep trying to find out what it is you're missing. I knew I was missing something and I couldn't place it. And she knew it. She could see like I was off or I was not happy. And she would always say to me all the time, why don't you draw? Like, draw something. And she'd say it all the time. And I just ignore her. Like, no, I'm fine. And she said it once, and I started doing it. And then it like a little thing led to another piece and another piece. Then I got on Instagram. I started seeing other dudes, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Started doing more. And then it clicked. I'm like, that's what I was missing. I was missing being creative. I was missing being a creator. And it was like, what the heck was I thinking all this time? Like, we all, as artists, we just want to create, whether it's, two sticks and, you just want to create something. And it was like, wow, it was so basic. Like I can create anything with some piece of paper. And I just stopped it. And that's kind of was the launching point to me, just putting the pencil down, drawing, trying different avenues. I'll be honest with you, I went traditional, like in 2020. I'm still drawing traditional. She bought me an iPad, she said, for Christmas. She goes, it's all about technology. So she's, here's an iPad. So up your drawing game. That iPad sat in its plastic for a good year. I didn't open it up. It's literally sat on my shelf. Yeah. And I still kept drawing traditional. I kept drawing traditional, kept drawing, and then she was finally like, are you ever going to open that thing? I was like, I guess. So I opened it. I downloaded Procreate and just started playing around. And here we are.
Wow.
Yeah, weird.
You know what, though? I get it. Like, especially, so I suppose then that means you would have met your wife, mid-90s or so? I don't mean to out you age-wise, but that is definitely of a time when comic books were frowned upon. And I've talked about this in previous interviews and just through talking with people, like, even when I was in high school, comic books were not cool. And then like Iron Man came out and that changed, like the movie. but I remember like in my last year of high school, for instance, right, I'm taking like university English and we're reading, plays and stuff. And these other kids in the class were like studying comic books in like workplace. And I was like, I want to read that. I want to study that. And then, I finished high school. I went into college. And my partner, still my partner, but at the time she was going into university. She's like, "Oh, I'm taking a comic book university class. We're studying Watchmen right now." And I was like, "What? Like, excuse me?" So it's definitely like late 90s through 2010, I think, is when comic books went from being like, "Ew, you're a nerd, you're not mainstream, get away," to like, "Yeah, you're a nerd, hell yeah." And now I think we're in the golden age of nerddom right now.
Right.
Yeah, so we're in a great spot. I guess for Celestial Knight then, what to touch on?
There's a lot of layers.
You've done a lot with this book. Like artistically, it's a lot to look at. You have a fantastic use of colors. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll talk about the medium. So, like you said, you've done traditional. You finally opened the iPad after a year, and now you're on to Procreate. Are you doing the comic fully digital?
Doing it fully digital. Same thing, still learning. I haven't taken any, I always ask, whenever I talk to artists, like, are you trained? Like, have you gotten an education, like, as far as art? For me, my whole education, and to my discredit, I don't even watch YouTube videos on like how to use Procreate. My whole thing is just playing and trying things out. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like, I for this book too, I'm using new tools. I've changed my lighting, my coloring, and my lighting process. But it was all through trial and error. It wasn't through any kind of formal training. So yeah, for me, it's just literally, I'll find a new tool, I'll try it out, see if it works. If it's something I love, I'll put it on, my Rolodex in here and be like, oh, this is the tool I want to go back to, or to keep consistent. But yeah, if you see my second Kickstarter, you could see the coloring is different than the first issue. And for me, I was told my boys, or I tell any kind of creator, like from book to book, we should be, as creators, we should be leveling up. When you look at Jim Lee back in the 90s to Jim Lee now, level up. And for me, it's the same way. Yeah, it's everything we're doing. It's level up. And I want to make sure that anyone who supports sees that progression of, me learning, doing a better product, better and better and better. And I think that's a telltale sign of, like, as a craftsmanship, like you're constantly trying to improve yourself. It's not settling or being complacent in my audience. It's really like, I want to give you my best of me. So I can't just settle on what worked last time. I have to do better. You have to do better. I think it matters when it comes to indie comics, 100%.
You know what? I think it matters for any level of comics. Like, one thing to speak on that point very specifically, I was at a Comic-Con somewhere, and Greg Capullo was there, and someone asked him the question of like, oh, what's the favorite thing you've ever drawn? And he had such a cool answer, which it lines up with what you just said, which is he had said, I don't even know the artist that drew Spawn. And because it was like 2015, I think, he's like, I don't even really remember the artist that drew Batman #1 from 2011. He's like, because I'm constantly changing, my art is constantly evolving, I'm not that guy anymore. He's like, I could not draw that again today. Because awesome. It's constantly play with tools, figure something out, maybe adopt a new software. If you're into traditional or analog, as I've taken to calling it, maybe you've adopted new pencils, new ways of sharpening your pencils. For you, it might be, I'm going to experiment and buy a brush pack or make my own brushes in the program.
Nice.
And that just, you play and play and play until you distill down your unique style, which clearly you've got a unique style, and I look forward to seeing how it evolves.
Awesome.
So earlier you mentioned this is going to be a 3-issue arc. I'm pointing at, I've got the page up. So issue 2 currently funded. We're going for more. From the sounds of it, though, because this is the origin, there is more to come. And I don't want to, get too far ahead of ourselves, but I always like to ask, if you got the story out completely as you see it in your head, like to completion, how many arcs is it?
So, I mean, for this one, I just want to establish the origin. And then for me, you look at, again, I'll bring back Peter Parker. His origin is many steps, whether it's, the spider, the part of Mary Jane, and living up to, this gorgeous model, Uncle Ben. Like, there's a different level of why he became Spider-Man. The same thing for mine. It's not just you gain one critical moment in your life, and you can. I mean, Batman's a perfect example, the pearls hitting the floor. I mean, that's a huge one. He lost his parents. Like, if that doesn't change you, like, that's a pivotal moment. For mine, it's multiple pivotal moments that leads him into the bigger picture. So for him, I've always said Celestial Knight isn't he's about protecting the Earth. So he's a protector of the planet. But what would, inspire someone to risk their life to protect a planet of people he doesn't know anyone about, or he only knows a small circle. He has people he doesn't agree with, but it's a whole planet. So for me, I start laying the foundation in issue 1, foundation in issue 2. And by the time you see issue 3, you'll be like, okay, I get it. Like, this is why he's committing to this. This is why he's putting his life on the line. It is an origin story from beginning to the end of issue 3. From there on, we'll see. I'm looking for, there's a lot of little things that are projects in the work. Interest from other creators who want to do team ups and kind of crossover, the fun stuff. Yeah, it's cool stuff. But for me, I think, sealing on issue 1, there's a spin-off already in the works on one of the characters. So little things that's not just, I want to keep going, like I think, and Konrad, you've probably seen it many times. They go to Kickstarter and you do one issue and it's a one and done. That's not how I roll. That's not how the guys I roll with. We have many stories to tell. It's going to be a process, but we want to just do, for me at least, issue 1 to 3. I do want to do my spinoff, and then we'll do the next arc after that. So I'm excited, dude. I can't even tell you, dude.
Hell yeah. You know what? Like you said, I've spoken with a lot of folks about their comics, their Kickstarter campaigns, or whatever other platform they're using. And some folks are like, oh, you know what? I'm really just worried about this issue right now. Some folks are like, oh, I have 56 comics planned out, and 100 more are mentally coming after that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And you're kind of like right in the middle where you're like, there is more to come, but not worried about it right now. Let's focus on, what's in front of us. I like it. I like the modest, the modest lens you're taking through it, because it's going to take you far, I think.
Well, let me ask you, Konrad. So the new Star Wars, the latest Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
I think like it began, and it didn't seem like there was a beginning to an end. It almost like they made it up on the fly. It was like, you know what I mean? Like when they made the first story, it was like, oh, then we're gonna do a second one and a third one, but it really wasn't. They made it up on the fly. For me, that's how I don't look at it as that. Like when I created issue 1, I already knew where issue 3 was gonna be. And it really was just more of the logistics of breaking it into 3, 4, 5 parts, but I settled on 3. I have my story to tell. It's not like I made issue 1, then I'm figuring out where issue 2 is going to be. Then I'm going to figure out where issue 3 is going to be, depending on where the excitement of the backers are or what's going on with me. No, it was when I made issue 1, I knew what the end of 3 would be. And for me, it's just that complete story. And I always go back, and I was just thinking about it this morning of like, how for me Star Wars, at least the last trilogy, was just so piecemeal, and their complaint was they never had a beginning to an end. It was just made up as the first one was finished, and they write the script to the second one, and after that did money, then they write the third one. Is for me, I feel comfort in knowing like I have a story to tell. I want everyone to understand it, love it, appreciate it. We can talk about it, get excited, and then we'll jump on to the next adventure.
Hell yeah. Like I said, modest focus, I guess, is perfect way to put it. Because it'll keep you honed in on what you're telling, the story you're making, on whenever the third campaign comes out. But for now, back to the second campaign, it's down below.
Awesome.
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to ask was, throughout the series, you make, or not the series, throughout the first issue, you make, I think it's 3 references to lyrics from the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, what clicked with me as soon as I'd seen, I think it was the second one as I was turning the page to it, I saw the second quote and I was like, huh, interesting. So with the Wu-Tang Clan, they're obviously a very philosophically minded group of musicians. If you haven't listened to them, folks out there, go check out their albums. They're sick. They get quoted in pop culture like nobody's business. They inspire so many people. And what I like about them is the big Wu-Tang symbol they have. It's often yellow. It feels like it should be gold. And the styles the individuals carry are kind of echoed in Celestial Night, sort of the flash, but the modesty, as well as some of the thought that went into the series you've created so far. And as we've discussed, you're kind of going to touch on like what can, just pure supportive love help you do. Why are you motivated? So I wanted to ask, like, what were some of the influences that we get with, or that you get rather, from Wu-Tang, and what kind of philosophical stuff might we get in issue 2 and 3?
So Wu-Tang, for those who know the Wu-Tang, they're from, they always say they're from Shaolin. That Shaolin is actually an acronym for Staten Island. So I'm I'm from New York, Staten Island to be exact. So we always refer to Staten Island as Shaolin. So for me, I grew up on Wu-Tang. Their lyrics, it was something that when I did the book, I wanted that book to have the feel of just the fight. Not the gritty nature of it, but be that down-to-earth kind of fight of fighting upwards. As I was drawing it and putting it together and thinking of Jeremy and his fight and his adventure and his development, that's what was in my brain of like those lyrics. And Shaolin, if you've been to Staten Island and that part where the Wu-Tang's from, you'll get it. It can be grimy, it could be dirty, it could be dangerous, but there's always that take no prisoners, that protect one another, that sense of camaraderie, the sense of moving forward that I really want to portray in the book. And for me, it was just a common thing where as I was going from chapter to chapter in my comic, it was a chapter to chapter of the Wu-Tang, of their music. Also, on when I think about their music, there's just they're not just when people think of Wu-Tang, you just think of rap, but just like you mentioned, their lyrics are so there's more to their lyrics than that. It's not just sounds good and it's it's rhymey. There's a lot of impact to it. When I created the book, another thing I was looking at was I wanted to be all like a full sensory overload. So not only my art, but the colors I wanted to pop in certain scenes. I wanted all your senses to be hit. Can I play music through my comic book? I can't play music. Imagine if we could do like a smart comic that played music as you turn the page.
I've seen people experiment with stuff
Really?
and QR codes and things. Yeah,
Okay.
There's some cool stuff out there, but I hear you because
So that was the thing. I wanted it to be like a full, all sensory input as you read the book, as you turn the page. If you know the music and you're turning the page and you're seeing that part of the chapter, you can hear the music in the background. So you can feel the tension, or you can feel the buildup. There's a scene where he's heading to New York City. Ghostface Killer. I wanted to play in the background because you're feeling that tension and that buildup as he's heading towards the kaiju. So if I ever curated a movie, like that soundtrack would be in there. Heavily influenced by James Gunn and his, Guardians of the Galaxy, because he always had music to supplement his scenes. I wanted to be that in a comic book. Can't play music, but I want to provide you the closest thing of like, here's a little snippet here, here's a snippet there. And I just think it's something where I've gotten feedback where it's different. You don't see it in any comic book, and obviously copyright, I get it. But it was just something that I wanted to put in my book to be like, is a soundtrack along with it. It's not just, I want to hit all your sensory overload as you read it.
Oh, it's so funny to me that you mentioned that sensory overload, like, because whenever I see someone, like an artist, put in their song or in their book, a track, or even if it's just a lyric with like notes on it and they don't actually attribute artist or title, I always like immediately take the phone out and it's like, Google the lyrics. Is it an actual song? Yes, it is. Play it. And I basically, while I'm reading, I let the song play out until I see another track mentioned, which with your book, it was like, oh, track, track, track. And I was like, cool, let's go.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's interesting that you mentioned you wanted to overload the senses because the kaiju, when he gets abducted, his armor in general, like it's a lot to look at, and there's a lot of dynamic stuff going on with your pages, and even the way in the first issue that you color, like Norman, for instance, instead of taking the time to like try and draw individual hairs on a short-haired dog, you've done like I don't know, like a blurred sort of palette because it looks right, but it also, my eye when I'm reading it, like it's a lot. So you definitely, you work the senses, which is highly appreciated.
Thank you.
You know what, we're coming to the end of the interview, but I do want to make sure I ask, because you've already mentioned it a few times. With the first one being such a success, and absolutely, we love family and friend support, but clearly it also happened with other people as well. You had 100 and how many backers?
It's 100 and I want to say 104, if I remember correctly.
Over 100 people backed it. I wanted to ask, how have you felt about the fan reception, the comments you get, stuff like that?
So I think the biggest thing from issue 1, I got so many reviews on it. I work with a large group of peers. I have a large group that I talk into any community, and I always, obviously, you're very wary of your peers and when they put out product and the reviews on their stuff. I've gotten so many great reviews, and it could be simple as like, love Norman. I had one gentleman, say like, don't tell your friends, but of all the indie books I read this year, yours was my favorite. Like, that's awesome. Like, I'm like, cool. Like, and it's not, if I put the book out and there's a message in there, and if there's a scene, and did that scene, to me, it's so important to me, did the scene translate? And when I get that, yes, it translated, and I didn't say what the scene is. I'm not going to say what the scene is now, but when you see the scene and it translates, then it's like, okay, I hit it right. They got my message that I was going for. It's more important to me. It's just so important. It's not just reading a cool story and an adventure. It's really understanding the dynamic of the character, the motivation, the makeup. And I struggle with this, Konrad, and you can give me your take on it. To make your character relatable or not relatable. So relatable in the sense that I want it to be relatable because I want everyone to understand and feel the connection. But also, we make comics. These are people in spandex fighting kaijus. How relatable is that really to you? You know what I mean? So I always feel like there's two different takes. Can I make it relatable because I want you to understand and, hit a nerve and really, be on the same level? Or do I want to tell you a fantastic tale where your life is already tough enough and you want to escape and you want to see a story that, you have that escapism? Give me your take. Like, what do you prefer when it comes to those two?
I think it I don't want to chew up too much time and do forgive me if I get into this, because I've thought about this a lot. Okay. I think it entirely depends on the angle at which you're telling your story. Okay. So in your case, with Jeremy, and it's the same way with Peter Parker, the same way with God, who else? Let me look at the wall. The same way with Sidekick for Hire, with Bouncy Ball Man, and in Coda, I'll say. Although it's a bit of a stretch. But basically, in those stories, I agree, it needs to be a relatable character, an imperfect individual who you can relate to. They don't have their shit together. They're not they don't have the best life. They've got maybe one or two things going for them well, and from that they can build and improve themselves. And then challenges come their way and they overcome and they learn. That's where you should have a relatable character. To me, where you need an unrelatable character, like you said, you're in spandex. It comes to me, it's characters like Superman and Batman who need to be unrelatable, right? There is no one on this planet that is Kal-El Superman, right?
Right.
He is this paragon of truth, justice, and no longer, I would say, the American way, but like truth, justice, and fairness. I don't know what you want to call it,
Right.
in like sort of the modern context, but that idea, right? Truth, justice, the American way, which is just always be all good all the time. And then there's like Batman, right? No one's Batman, right? We have guys as wealthy, like Bezos and Musk. We have guys as physically talented, maybe like some of the top UFC fighters, but no one gets all of that, right? And they're these paragonal characters where you would tell a story from like a moral perspective, right? Like you could not tell the story of Superman, or sorry, of All-Star Superman with like Peter Parker. Because it's that I have this moral standing and now we're going to test it. And that's to me where you need this unrelatable, perfect character. To me, most stories coming from imperfect to becoming better, more interesting.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, that's my take on it. So we're at about an hour. I don't want to, like, my last two questions should be fairly quick, but I want to make sure I ask. So tell me about Savage Sandbox.
We're a publisher, so there's 7 creators right now. The great thing about Savage Sandbox, if you are into comics, you have a creator in any lane. So I have an anime guy. Our most successful, he has 5 books. He's Dungeons and Dragons. His book is based on Dungeons and Dragons. I have a vigilante guy who is, if you're into ultra violence, his comics about that. Mine is the Cape guy. So I'm always like, I'm the Cape. I have the classic superhero story. We have a suspense. We have a horror. So 7 creators. We have a vigilante and an action guy. So we have 7 creators, all different lanes. We form together, great group, constantly giving each other feedback, keeping us on the straight and narrow, keeping us humble, and just a big support system. For any campaign, we cross promote one another. We constantly, what do you think of this page? One of the guys send me over his pages. He's just learning coloring. What do you think of this coloring on it? It's a nice think tank and a great support system. We all have different books. We're all different lanes, but what combines us and brings us together are our indie comics and our love for indie comics. And it's just nice. We always say, I always say, indie supports indie, no matter who you are. Indie supports indie. But this is like a subculture of that for me, of like this great group of guys who just, really support one another. We've been together for 3 years. Looking for bigger and better things. We're in year 3, so we have all these cool projects in the work, and slowly we'll get there. We're at cons, we're out there. Look for us. You'll be seeing us a lot. Yeah,
I look forward to it.
Awesome.
Then you know what? With the last little bit of time here, second last question. Folks like ourselves, nerds, often collect things, right?
Yeah.
Myself, yourself back there, you've got a wall of comics, a whole bunch of CGCs. What would you say, Dennis, is the crown piece of your collection? Not maybe the most expensive, not maybe the rarest, but what's the thing when you see it, you're like, I own that, that's a part of my thing. What gives you the most joy?
I did a lot of blank sketch covers before I did my own book. So one of my things was I would do a blank sketch cover. I'm sure you've seen it, a blank sketch cover of the Thanos one. So just the Thanos.
Oh, yeah.
Blank sketch cover. So I did, remember Infinity War, where Thanos was, his hand was coming down on Captain America, and Captain America was fighting his hand, that classic scene. So I did that, but I did Invincible. So I did Invincible, the hand's coming down on Invincible, and he's holding off Thanos' hand. So I had that. I did it on blank sketch cover. I sent it to CGC. I had Ryan Otley sign it, which was cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. It came back a great grade. It was a 9.8. But CGC, someone from CGC reached out to me and just said, I love your piece. Like, it was a beautiful piece of artwork. And I was like, out of nowhere, like this person from customer service didn't have to say. And to me, that hit bigger than Ryan Otley. Ryan Otley's cool. It's on my wall here. I have a wall of blank sketch covers that I did. And I always have I have one Celestial Knight fighting Spawn. Had Todd McFarlane sign it, came back a 9.8. He wrote on it, nice work. nice art on it and signed it Todd McFarlane. But for me, it's Celestial Knight fighting Spawn, 9/8. Todd McFarlane said nice art, like geeking
That's
out, like
so cool.
yeah, I'm like geeking out like crazy. But like my own, whenever I do a blank sketch cover, whether it gets a good grade or not, just the fact that an artist looked at it, someone I admire, put their signature on it. I got them on my wall. It's something I could look at. I go, that's mine. It's only one ever in the world.
Yeah.
And I could just say, you're not going to find any of those, and I don't sell them. To me, it's just a little, moment in time. I could show it to my kid, like this guy, he's the creator of Spawn, and he signed my book. He said, nice art. This guy, he's known for Invincible. It's super cool. I had one by Stegman. I have one by J. Scott Campbell. Walt Simonson, I did do a Beta Ray Bill on a Thor one. He signed, you had the Walt Simonson, the dinosaur he does.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm like, that's like, again, that's my little thing. I have plenty of expensive books behind me. I always tell my kids, I die, this is going to pay for my funeral. Like, you need to know the prices on this stuff. But my little wall of my stuff on the right over here is just my personal art, signed, nerd out. It's just my nerd corner.
Hell yeah, that is so cool.
It's fun.
I'm very interested because that's your own art. One,
Yeah.
just that CGC wouldn't be like scribble or whatever. But also, have you ever had anyone not sign it?
No, that's a good question. Not yet. I've gone to cons where I've met creators, met Bagley, Michael Golden. Some of them I've met. I've never had anyone say, at least on my own artwork, not want to sign it. They've all been very pleasant. I have talked to creators who weren't very nice to me, but I think we all have those con stories where they're kind of like poo-poo you, and you're like, oh, he wasn't what I imagined he would be. But no, I mean, I don't have a lot. I probably have 8 books right now that are on my wall that are my art. It's funny because some of them are old. They're like 2 years old, and my style has gotten better and better. So I look at it now and like, ooh, that line there, the coloring there is a little rough. Or ooh, that line, that line weight is not the greatest. Like my lines are better now. But it's funny. It's a capsule. It's a moment in time. It's funny.
That's so cool. It's also a very interesting way to see your progression.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Keep it up, Dennis. That is super cool.
Thank you.
Then I guess, yeah, that to close out the interview, what is it that you'd like the people out there to know?
I guess, well, I'll give you one message. I always tell, when I'm at cons and I talk to young creators, one of the things when people come to my table, I say, you draw, you write, what do you do? You're here at the con for a reason. And whenever they say they write or they draw, they play music, or, I don't draw, I just, doodle. I say, I created this character 35 years ago. Listen, like, you may be telling me right now it's just something simple, or I don't really do anything with it, or whatever. 35 years from now, you never know. Never let go of that dream. You just can't. I know it sounds cliche and stupid, but 35 years ago, I sat next to my grandmother and I was terrified to go outside to get jumped. Now look at me. I have my own book, super proud of it. I got this cool character I love to talk about. I met all these great people at cons, on the Instagram, on Facebook, UConn, right? Just kick-ass people I would never have met if I didn't chase this silly little boyhood dream of creating this character, putting on a piece of paper, having the stones to be like, check out my cool character. He's gold and he shoots power blast. He has a funny ass dog who says funny things. If you have a dream, I don't care what it is, it's never too late. You just never know. Just say, I want to try it and give it a shot and go for it. That's what I got for you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, sir.
Dennis, I think that's a fantastic thing to let people know. And absolutely, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you, Konrad. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you a lot more. I hope this isn't the last time. I hope we cross paths one day. But yeah, love talking with you.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? When number 3 goes to come out, let me know. We'll set it up.
Yes,
and yeah, absolutely. Folks out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Click the links down below. Go to the Kickstarter now. Get your $3 digital copy, $8 physical copy, or hell, spend $60 and get a drawn, amazing sketch cover. And absolutely like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2? Yeah. Collector problems, cliffhangers, mysteries. You need answers. When did Batman become Green Lantern? I get it. True believer, not lying. Always up for an awesome summer crossover tie-in. High flying, full color or black and white. Splash pages, flashbacks. Whet your appetite with new costumes, team ups, first loves, first appearances.